Please put your hands together and welcome Samantha.
I live in Newquay now, but I lived in France for 2 years, in northeastern France. And I'd like to start off with a poem about, well, based on the French resistance, inspired by the resistance. I'm going to dedicate this poem to a lady called Sylvie, who I've just met. Vive la résistance! It was on such a night as this that I floated like a debutante into the arms of a cornfield outside Rouen, my parachute silks streaming into a bridal train adorning the corn. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of what it must be to be a woman, always dragging a dress through obtuse fields. So I unharnessed myself from the lot, rolled up my foals and ran off to the lich gate of Sainte-Marie-du-Chêne, where I awaited an assignation with a Monsieur Lefort, who passed me a map and a cigarette packet, which I followed to a farm, to be met by a frowning chap in breeches, who unhooked the door of a barn where his daughter was hitching up a bed for me in linsey-woolsey. At the altar, I hovered between doubt and belief until she glided down the aisle, stitched into my parachute. And for a second, we soared above the priest, the spire, the higgledy fields, the two of us threaded together in the silks that had saved me, which I later unbuttoned, and she has since trapped in the attic in case one day they take off without us. Thank you. I've always been fascinated by gardens and allotments, although I don't own an allotment myself. No good at fruit. And worse, she has forgotten how to dig, widowed at the brink of this window of land, 12 foot square allotted by the council, one for each of their quota of years. If she stares long enough, courgettes will grow. Yes, the small heat of a cloche console her, that transparent hat on a pout of chard. At least that's all she can make out from here, with only a quarter of her vision left. She can't see his strawberries rotting, the nets pinning them down, down, staking a claim for him. Outside his shed, the plums sit like unripe tears in her hand. The sun strikes 6 lilies. Her blaze of white. She has a plot, yes, she'll turn it all over to dahlias, a bedspread of Lauren Michels and castle drives that she will see from upstairs on summer nights, whilst the horseshoe still smiles above the door. I've got lots of junk in my house. Most of it's from Craft in Aberystwyth, with little red or yellow or blue circles on it. And one of those pieces, no, it's true. One of those pieces is a tiny pair of Delft clogs, which I found there a few years ago, and I wondered who had kind of handed them over, as it were, who had abandoned them, how they came to be there, what their story was. Delft. I promise, when I pack up the clogs, raise them to chime with one chipped toe your passing, when I glue back a pleat in the skirt of the lady with pale blue hair, whose apron said bugger after she fell down the stairwell, revealing a bell beneath her dress on which a windmill was waving goodbye to 4 birds reflected in the inky water. When I wrap the coal tile where your butter flattened the sheaves of hay, combed to a tuft in the still wind, in which etched-in cows stared out under low clouds looming over a walled garden whose gate I long to walk through always. I promise the glaze will be wet on all your Delft, on both my hands. About 5 years ago, I went on a table etiquette course, partly because I felt my table manners needed brushing up on, but also because I wanted to do some research for this poem. I think I was the only person there who was planning on writing a poem about table manners. In fact, I could probably run the course really, but table manners. Let's have you sitting straight. Your relationship with furniture comes first. Don't be marooned at the linen's edge. Etiquette's a dialect to help. Hold your napkin like an injured bird, then unfurl its water lily to quilt your lap. Keep a candle to the centre of the map, Gerberer to your right, unless that is you've anything to hide, in which case make it 2. Do not remove your shoes or show any flesh. Tilt your soup's light towards her like an invitation to swim. Sip as though you're working on it. Elbows off. If she asks for salt, remember pepper's meant. Don't stare. Set your smile to simmer. Stand when a lady leaves, and if you catch yourself distorted in a fork, do not fret with a cruet or a match. We don't leave marks, except on glass. Cutlery is a code. If your implements kiss on the plate, this indicates you're after more. 10 to 5 means it's over. I used to spend all my summer holidays as a child in a house in Shropshire. And the title of the poem is the address of the house. 40 Hampton Road. The hedge fought back as we'd force our way through to the stream that whispered to my red boat on the jaunty rocks. Under the clock's frown we'd sprinkle hundreds of thousands of hundreds and thousands. The twins pointed their pas de deux at the piano we banged after tea. Dave, said the pebble dash under the windowsill when I'd watch my sister squeal water all over the raspberries. Anna loves Dave, glinted the veiny stones. I'd try the handle to the balcony. Locked again. It was unsafe, you see. When I first heard the news, I thought that was the door the murderer had picked. But he was already in the house. She died in my bed 20 years after I left, with her mother. Here we all are, lined up in front of the raspberry bushes. Her father, point blank, in the head. I'm the little one at the end, yes. Look, sticky hands. This is one of my new key poems. The language of doors. If you have leaned back full tilt in a rocking chair on a veranda by moonlight, pulled your coat closer beneath the balustrade's ramblings as the wind lays itself at your feet like a performance about to begin. Then you'll have given in to splayed shingles, confessed to raking cornices that you are, in fact, a clapboard and coins kind of girl who goes for low-pitched hip roofs, lunettes, fretwork, reglets on Cape Cods, that rafter tails are not for you, nor self-effacing facades, nor numbered kits of four squares shipped by Sears Roebuck, nor the syllables fluent in glass over the porch, Araminta, Zenobia, Barmenda, Claremont, that stick styles your thing, sawtooth trims and beaded board soffits, that you adore a house for its lintels and plinths, its chevrons and shells. This poem looks at emigrating from Bristol to the US in the 1850s. Émigré. Let me cradle this stiff body one more time before I lay it in a velvet bed. I've no mind to pin its strings to the fingerboard or coax the blonde hair of a bow over its bony shoulders. This, the only companion of your narrow bunk in steerage on the voyage out, and on the bar stool down the cobbled lane where you sank your last glass of porter the hour you boarded, at one with the swing of the ship, tapping out a jig in 3/4 time as the engine crooned ahead. When you were startled by a sea flute swooning through the camisoles she'd strung between bunks, you made music all the way to Ellis Island. I am custodian all the way back of your silent violin and this, a doll-sized coffin. Sorry, it does get better eventually. It just takes a while. Quite a chunk of this book, Banjo, is on Antarctica, well, on 3 Antarctic expeditions from the turn of the last century. Scott's last expedition and his first Antarctic expedition, Discovery, 1901, 1902. His Discovery expedition had its own theatre in a hut named the Royal Terror Theatre at the foot of Mount Terror on Ross Island in Antarctica. The Minstrels at -60. A butler is a must, as is a vicar, a maid, 2 policemen and a decanter on a silver tray. The suspect's wife will be on the buxom side with ruffles at the neck and cuff, even if you're so far south of the equator in a field of ice your only audience can be the ship's complement and silence for miles towards the pole. We've all had our faces blacked for the stage at least once. Lashley's your man there. You need to stay on good terms with a stoker at 60 below. 3 sweaters beneath petticoats and tails, we grow into roles larger than the life we left by the clematis over the porch at dusk. I keep going back to that night in the hut. The captain laughed so much, his tears froze to jewels as we flounced back to the ship all rouged up and powdered with flour. Oh, you've no need to worry about me, love. I've no taste for disguise, except in finnesco and senegris for sledging. Suits me. You could bury me in that get-up. Shall I finish that? Yeah, for that section? Okay, thank you very much. I'll read some more Antarctic ones afterwards. Thank you. And I'd like to dedicate this first poem to Kenneth Grebe, my architect friend. The title is Artist in Residence, and it was inspired by a photograph at the Scott Polar Research Institute in Cambridge. It looks at the crew of Endurance having their hair cut one day when the ship was stuck in the ice during the 9-month period when the ship was stuck in the ice, and it's written from the point of view of the artist in residence, George Marston. The bouquet of hair I'm holding in my lap is my own. That's Wild with the razor. To his right, Crean bites a pipe in black and white. Too dark out for the dogs that day, so we had our hair cut in the Ritz. Don't we look a bunch of convicts? As the locks fell, I'd soothe each tuft, as if about to dip a horsehair tongue into magenta or forest green, smell the pine shedding its fringe at my feet, decode the script of its bark, still sharp in Hampshire. The whole of my work went down with that ship, except 8 drawings. It was then my tubes of oils were commandeered to seal the seams of the 3 rowing boats by which we made our escape, saved by paint. When I was writing this Antarctic sequence, one of the aspects that I reflected on was the experience of photographers and how they were affected by the various challenges that they encountered en route to the pole, whether that was on the sea itself, on the ship, or on the ice. Ponting. In the end, we turned him into a verb, to pont, meaning to pose in ice and snow until frozen. On the voyage south, he'd be tilting plates in the dark room, in one hand the developing dish, in the other a basin of vomit. One minute he'd arrange us in groups with a cinematograph, then rush to the ship's side. Once, Ponko roped up his J.A. Prestwich over Terra Nova's bow, balanced on 3 planks. He lost the tip of his tongue when it stuck to the camera at 30 below. Corneas can freeze to peep sight. At 100 degrees of frost, the film's ribbon will split. To pont would also mean pontificate. He'd insist on reeling the film slowly to prevent sparks. We'd rehearse the pole picture, mount the camera on the theodolite tripod, wind twine over the trigger and guide it round a ski stick to get the direction right. He'd instruct us on setting the shutter, how to use a flash in the tent with 1/4 inch of powder and F11. En route to the pole, I sent back negatives with the support teams, a sheet torn from my sledging log detailing exposure data, how composed we were, how cold. Well, the captain of every Antarctic ship 100 years ago would always aim to have at least one piano or a pianola on board, even if nobody could actually play it. The piano. In a jangle of harnesses, she arrived late at the quay side, so we left her out on deck for a week with the ice picks and coal sacks until the Sunday we steamed into Biscay. Neither door to the wardroom would admit her maple ribs, so the chief engineer cut her in half with a cook's meat saw. Grease helped. Each string quivered as we unshipped the keyboard. She braced herself beneath the rigging, her hitch pins visible, her struts jumpy. I passed the afternoon with Evans, handing her parts down, gluing her back, inserting dowels. My tuning lever twisted easily inside her. Later, we were all over her for a minstrelsy blacked up in burnt cork until a squall rolled the vessel 30 degrees. We trampled the camp stools of our mock stalls in red cummerbunds and oakum wigs in the rush to take in the topgallants. She screeched across the wardroom floor, her back tense against my cabin door. I just read 3 more, I think, all from this sequence. I've always been fascinated by chairs, and this poem looks at the chairs in the wardroom on board Discovery, Scott's first Antarctic ship. And if you want to see them, they're up in Dundee. Swivel. The seats in the wardroom are revolving mahogany, speaking in creaks wherever we go, basket weave for the tropics, leather for the cold. We cross decks in mess dress without spilling a drink, from England to Africa, New Zealand and back, waltzing through the 40s as low as we dare, to the swish of pack ice, the intimacy of days full of night. We can't permit our chairs to strut south through the swell. We nail their feet to the floor. They arch their backs to protest, all bone on show, flaunt wicker and brass. At dinner, we keep them well under control. Ignore their cries. All they need's a good oiling. Spin to the officer on your left at hors d'oeuvre, right for the mains, dead ahead at dessert. But first, twist again on your reversible chairs. One of the youngest members of Scott's last expedition was Apsley Cherry Garrard, who was 22 and having a year out in Antarctica. My year out. More than the company of girls, I missed colour until my hyacinth bulbs bloomed blue in a basin of sawdust. I discovered I could skin a petrel, loved a lantern chat, but never got used to sleeping alongside 5 empty bunks for a year, or guessed I'd been nailing shut a small box of each missing man's possessions, or forgot the day we heard a crack like a shot, Scott's arm breaking as Atch freed his diary. It was only back in the developing tank in the dark room that we saw our companions swim towards us from the pole, blink in its milky light, walk from the stiff chrysalis of film that had lain 8 months beside their indigo skin. Actually, I'll just read 2 more. Curtain call. We've been taking it in turns to undo our shirts, in -70 to nurse Oates's frostbitten foot on our breasts. Jokes in the tent are discouraged since even laughing hurts. Yesterday I threw a cup of boiling tea into the air to see it freeze before it hit the ice. If I breathe near a sheet of my diary, the pencil slips across its polished page as if I'm writing in a book of glass. Our clothes crackle like suits of armour. We have to play the game of statues to hear each other speak. The hardest part so far was ruffling the mane of each pony before we shot them on the barrier. Every night, our sleeping bags solidify to slabs of granite. The title of my final poem is Green Heart, which, as some of you may know, was a type of wood that was used in the construction of Antarctic ice ships at the turn of the last century. Green Heart. Sipiro and Bibiru are the names my father used for Demerara Greenheart in Guyana, its timber too tough to cut with an adze. 26 inches of it parted my cabin bed from the frozen seas, which squeezed the ship in their grip like a nut. At the first bite of the ice, every man on Endurance felt as though he himself had been touched. You'd hear it crack like distant artillery as the floes fought out a border, tenting up into starched hedgerows, until 18th October 1915, when they wedged into her port beam, she heeled 30 degrees. Below deck, every ladle, picture and curtain hung as if caught in a high wind all along the starboard bulkhead. She sighed from midships forwards in a brash tangle of masts and ropes until the ice swallowed her whole. Her English elm, her pitch pine, her Indian teak, her Honduras mahogany, her Danzig oak, her green heart. Thank you.